Hey guys, let's talk about Incident in a Ghostland, which is directed by Pascal Leger, who made one of my favorite movies, Martyrs. If you think that this movie is going to be anything like Martyrs, sadly mistaken. It's nothing at all like Martyrs, except for the part about two girls getting kind of beaten and tortured a little bit. Just a heads up, this is going to be a spoiler review. The movie starts out with a mother and two daughters moving into a home which one of the daughters describes as Rob Zombie's house. This is the type of movie where characters do silly shit like leave the front door open directly after the daughter has just read an article about home invasion style murders in this town. There's a bunch of unnecessary things that happen, like there's a large musical cue that happens when headlights are turned on, and I felt like that scene would have been more effective without the large musical cue, because there is a difference between a jump scare, being scared, and being startled. When you just go behind someone and loudly yell boo, that's startling them, that's not scaring them. And I'm trying to figure out whether someone else directed this and Pascal Leger just put his name on it, because it's so beneath what he previously gave us. It's almost like he said, fuck it, I'm just gonna make a mainstream American style horror movie. Maybe he's making fun of that. Maybe this is all tongue-in-cheek and he's making fun of the mainstream horror movies that we have in the US. Next, one of the girls gets her period and she starts crying, because I guess it's her first period, and I'm sitting here thinking, why are you even crying? You're a teenager, you're high school age. Try being one of those of us that had to deal with having a period, you know, and going out for recess in elementary school. That's when you cry. Not when everyone in your class probably already had their period and you're the last one. Like, what is your deal? I don't know what that... TMI? Is that TMI? Y'all will be alright. A home invasion happens and the mother tries to fight off the invaders as that one useless ass daughter sits there holding her head and crying instead of actually helping her mother, because there was the mother and two daughters and three home invaders. 3 on 3 would have been at least a closer to fair fight, but 1 on 3, or was it 2 home invaders? I can't remember whether it was 2 or... No, it was 2, because I just remember the androgynous one and then the man-child, giant man-baby. So I think there was only 2. So yeah, 3 on 2, they would have had a fighting chance if the one daughter didn't lose her shit and just sit in a corner crying. For some reason, this movie keeps showing us Lovecraft's picture, and I'm sitting here thinking, Lovecraft? When I think of Lovecraft, I think of Dagon, I think of Reanimator, I think of From Beyond. And I'm trying to figure out what's the connection that Leger is drawing between this movie and Lovecraft. I'm pretty familiar with Lovecraft. See that? You see what a bookmark is? I mean, I haven't totally finished reading every single part of it, but I've read a lot of Lovecraft, and I'm trying to figure out what this movie has to do with H.P. Lovecraft at all. The movie jumps forward to Beth being a famous author. And she's married, lives in the city, I'm guessing. For some reason, her child's running around the house dressed like a clown. And I'm still thinking to myself, Pascal Leger, stop being weird, nigga. If you watch Atlanta, you know where that's from. So then she receives a call from her sister Vera, who's very hysterical. And this prompts her to go back to the house to visit her sister and her mother. And I'm thinking, why are the mother and sister still living in this house? I just sold the house just based off that creepy doll in the mirror thing. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. Much less the home invasion. I mean, seriously, at one point I walked into my house and there was a couple teenagers trying to steal my laptop, and luckily I caught them as they were trying to do it, and they didn't get away with the laptops, and I still felt uncomfortable in my own home for like the next 6 months, and I still ended up selling. I sold that house in was it 2017 or 2016? I sold that house. I feel like it was last year, but it might have been the year before last. Really lost track of time. Anyways, I sold that house. Then on top of it, the place looks completely the same. They didn't even change the wallpaper or even try to remodel it so that at least it looks different, so that it feels different for them. And this should have been a hint to me, but at the time it was not a hint to me. The sister that made the frantic phone call is immeasurably damaged, and she's kept in the basement in a padded room, which you would think would be the last place she'd want to be, since some of the worst parts of the home invasion happened in that basement. I would think keeping her there would completely re-traumatize her. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, why don't you have like an Institute of Living or a lakeside or some place for her to go if she's this messed up? Shout out to my Connecticut and Orlando listeners. She gets home and she sees her mother walking around with a stroller filled with dolls. And for a split second, she thinks that she sees and hears the truck that the original home invaders had used. So far we see that her sister's been driven mad. Her mother is acting very oddly. And I'm thinking, is this like a precursor to her own descent into madness? What's funny is during the scenes where she was with her husband and her child in the city, my mother actually called the twist of this movie at that point, but I hadn't picked up on it then. And now I'm just going to read the actual note that I wrote because I thought this was kind of funny. I wrote, yep, Pascal Leger said, I want to make a Texas Chainsaw Massacre Hills Have Eyes type movie, but put pictures of Lovecraft in it because reasons. I'm going to read this other one because there's no way I'm going to remember to say this. The doll room scene. She stabs a dude in the neck and should have run while the mutant inbred man baby flailed around, but she doesn't because she's a dumb wench. She did finally hit him with a typewriter and she should have bashed his brains in then. Wendy, darling, light of my life. I said I'm not going to hurt you. I'm just going to bash your brains in. I'm going to bash them right the fuck in. I'm probably misquoting that, but that's what popped into my head. Then there's one point where they're running, I think they're in a field somewhere, and they could have almost gotten away if they had just ran right to the police instead of babbling about witches and ogres and whatever the hell else they were babbling about. Notice that I did not mention what the twist of the movie is, because I'm not going to completely spoil the whole thing. I'm just going to talk about certain elements, and then you have to see the movie yourself for the twist. I may, at the end of this video, discuss how I felt about the twist, but I'm not going to tell you what the twist is. At one point, there's a scene where Beth kind of retreats into her own mind, and there's a Big Chin character that I'm assuming is supposed to be H.P. Lovecraft talking to her, and it just has no place at all in the movie, and it just happens just because reasons. There's only really one great scene in this movie, and that's when Beth fights, I'm going to call him Great Value Buffalo Bill, and she starts biting chunks out of him. I feel so disappointed in the director. This movie is such trash garbage. It's like, it has a slasher movie's musical cues and a barely coherent script. And the worst part is that one actress actually got her face cut for real in the filming of this movie because she was directed to bang on some glass and it wasn't the right type of glass and she fell through it and cut her face. And then this really makes me feel like Pascal Leger is a real jerk because the poster artwork has a girl's face, well, like a face mask of a girl, and the mask is cracked right kind of where the actress's face is slashed. I hope she sues the ever-living shit out of him, because just for that alone, he's being an insensitive asshole. And I can't be the only person that was a little bit pissed that there was no ghosts in this. Why are you naming this Incident in a Ghostland and there's no ghosts? That annoyed me. Like, they should have named it Tortured or Fractured, like the girl's mental state or the facial mask. I kind of like the idea of a person dealing with, well, there you go. There's your connection to Martyrs. It's another person dealing with extreme trauma or it's another movie dealing with a person with a fractured mental state due to extreme trauma. So that is similar in theme to Martyrs. But this movie also adds the element of a person creating worlds or escaping their trauma by creating different worlds. And I actually liked how they did that better in Sucker Punch. Don't at me, I like Sucker Punch. If you want to know why, go to my website. I wrote a really lengthy post about all the things that I really appreciated in Sucker Punch, and that's at whatdidijustwatch.com. This, on the other hand, felt derivative of the other movies that I mentioned, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Hills Have Eyes, maybe a little bit The Last House on the Left. And the villains in this made no sense. It was like a random transvestite and a deformed man baby traveling together in an ice cream truck. It's like, do you guys remember Mad Libs, where you would have sentences and you have to fill in a sentence, you'd have to ask the other person to fill in a sentence with a noun or verb or adverb, and then when you read it back, it just is like a jumbled mess. I feel like he came up with this concept either using Mad Libs or tossing coins. It just didn't make any sense. And I feel like people are going to give this movie more credit than it deserves just because of the director's previous successes. And also because earlier this year we had Truth or Dare and Wish Upon, so they're going to look at this like, oh, this is, a step above. It's more artistic. But it's still not a good film in my opinion. I didn't enjoy this movie. I didn't like the characters. It felt cheap. It was like he wrote the concept of this movie on a napkin at a coffee shop during the time it took for them to make the coffee for him. It felt half-baked, half-assed, and I'm just disappointed. Also, the H.P. Lovecraft connection it still bothered me because I feel like Dean Koontz and Stephen King would have been a better fit because they've both written about the subconscious mind or the mind fracturing and creating different worlds, that type of thing. So instead of having all the callbacks to H.P. Lovecraft, you should have had callbacks to Dean Koontz or callbacks to Stephen King. That would have made at least a little bit more sense. When I think of Lovecraft, I think more body horror. I think more sea creatures, with the exception of I think it was called Mountains of Madness or In the Mouth of Madness. I forget which it was. I think it's the Mountains of Madness. That one is a little bit different than the other sea creature or body horror heavy H.P. Lovecraft stories. But like I said, I have not read all the stories. I've just read a lot of H.P. Lovecraft stories. And this one, I couldn't see the connection. If I'm mistaken, feel free to correct me in the comments. Did you see any H.P. Lovecraft in this movie if you saw it? And with that, I guess I'll sign off. Like I always say, just because I love something doesn't mean you won't hate it. And just because I hate something doesn't mean you won't love it. Did you see Incident in a Ghostland? Do you know a lot about H.P. Lovecraft? Is there a connection? Let me know in the comments. Bye.